you guys ready to head off the trails? I'm the Cryptid Huntress, Jessica Jones, and I'm ready to take you on a mysterious journey right now. We welcome you to Off the Trails right here on the Spaced Out Radio's YouTube channel. If you guys haven't hit subscribe yet, please do. We would love to have you. We'd really appreciate the love. And shout out to BUMBLEFOOT for that amazing intro music. It really sets the tone, and I really appreciate it. All right, you guys can follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, on Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on TikTok at Spaced Out Radio. You guys can find me at thecryptidhuntress.com, and please subscribe to my YouTube channel, The Cryptid Huntress. All right, I have a daytime show every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern and a nighttime show every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern. So y'all come join, subscribe, share my videos out, and come be part of my tribe over on Patreon as well. The Cryptid Huntress over on Patreon. And also, if you guys would like to support my work, y'all go shop at War Woman Goods. That's over on Etsy. I appreciate all of your continued support. You guys rock. I have the best audience in the entire world. Okay. I have a fantastic guest here at Spaced Out Radio tonight. I have Trey Howell here in the studio tonight of Squatch Me Now. Okay, and don't forget that right after this show, After Hours has an amazing program set up for us tonight. So please go check them out right after the show is over tonight. Okay, let's get to our guest. Trey Howell is a lifelong researcher of all things esoteric. For 20 years, he's worked in the film and marketing, and currently owns Howell Media, a digital marketing agency focused on content and social media strategy. In 2019, he launched Squatch Me Now, a social media presence where he curates the best evidence for Bigfoot phenomenon. In the last 3 years, Squatch Me Now has grown to 500,000 followers across multiple social platforms. He's currently producing a film series on the subject of Sasquatch entitled Masters of the Hunt. And Trey has actually been my guest on my former show a while back, and it's been about a year since we've talked. So we have a lot of catching up to do. So please help me welcome Trey Howell to Spaced Out Radio tonight. Hey, Trey.
How you doing?
I'm excellent. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for being here with me tonight.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. I love talking about Bigfoot.
well, that's why we're here. And you have a fantastic social media platform called Squatch Me Now, and you have a huge following. And you post the best evidence of Bigfoot definitely on Instagram. Okay, of all the places. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a mix of videos, photos, tracks, structures. And I love articles, especially the old articles, the Wild Man Days articles. Yeah. So I love posting those. So I think the Instagram account is the most comprehensive, probably. TikTok, obviously, mostly just videos and that kind of thing. But get to go a little more in depth on the IG. So I like that page.
Yeah. You're a filmmaker, okay? And I know the last time I talked to you, we were speaking about, hoaxes and things like that, like people posting videos that are, people in suits and stuff. And you have a really good eye to detect whether, and it's not just your eye, but you are a professional filmmaker. So you're able to see when people are actually hoaxing and making things that aren't real,
There's a lot, there's a lot that goes into it. I think people underestimate a lot of what they see and a lot of what would go into hoaxing a fairly believable Bigfoot video. I think a lot of us can clearly see many when they first come out that they're fake. But to go, and that's not to say that there aren't a lot of fakes out there, but it's a lot of work, and I've done it not in the sense of hoaxing, but in the sense of filmmaking, and I've spent quite a bit of time in that industry in various areas, including makeup effects, including cinematography. So there's a lot of different things that go into not only what it would take to hoax a video, but the elements of a video that make people think it might not be real. Constantly I get on all my posts, someone's going to say, why is it always blurry? Why is it, pixelated or whatever the case may be. And there's so many aspects to any film or video that might cause those issues that don't necessarily make it automatically a hoax. From shutter speed to focal length, to digital compression, as it's lived on the internet for so many times and for so long. It's people expect it to be this high quality video, but a lot of times when I get my videos, it's already been somewhere else. I've had to download it. So someone's uploaded it and downloaded it, and they probably weren't the first person to upload it. So every time a video is uploaded and downloaded on the internet, you're adding what's called compression to it, digital compression, and that degrades the image. So you get more pixels, the pixels get bigger, and it looks a lot worse. So unfortunately, I remember in the mid to late 2000s, there was a lot of really great footage up, and it's like a lot of the originals have disappeared. I don't know why. I don't know why they've gone away from the internet, but it seems like a lot of these great original videos, like the original Independence Day video, and a lot of those are no longer available. So we're dealing with a lot of copies of a copy of a copy of a copy kind of situation.
Now, the Independence Day video, that's the one with the mother carrying a baby over the rocks. Is that right?
Right. So if you want to just talk about what that would take to, I mean, I've got a guy in a Bigfoot suit right now pretty regularly, which we'll talk about later, but it's very difficult for him to gracefully move in that. And in that Independence Day film, you're looking at, let's just hypothesize that it's a person in a suit. It's a very expensive suit, for one. I mean, we've spent thousands of dollars on Bigfoot suits. It's a very expensive suit because it's fairly believable. There's a lot of good musculature and that kind of thing. Then you've got a puppet, a baby puppet, right? If it's fake, that's the person's having to move autonomously, with their hand, unless
with
it's
a baby.
Right. Unless it's animatronic, which is like, you see those sort of remote control special effects sometimes. And that's even more expensive. So now you're getting really crazy. And then, so this person is walking down about a 45-degree angle through a boulder field in this suit, manipulating a baby puppet and staring at the camera the entire time. You have to consider at a certain point, that's not easy. That's really hard to do. The actor we're using for some of the Bigfoot stuff that I'm shooting right now is 6'7", 350 pounds. He's a big guy. And he was very hard to find. That's not someone that you can they're not just growing on trees. You can't find people that are anywhere close, close to Bigfoot size around. So, with this headpiece and a few other things, we're getting around 7 feet with some big shoes and a conical headpiece that we've got on him, but it's still that's still the low end range for Bigfoot. So I think then we have to also think about focal length. A lot of people are talking, a common comment I get on social media is everyone has an iPhone these days. Everyone has a great cellular phone. Why can't we get a good image? Well,
I hear that all the time, Trey. All the time.
So I gotta be honest, it's really annoying. So anybody out there listening, I'm really annoyed if you've commented that on my page, because I've answered it a lot of times. And the answer is, go look at what wildlife photographers use for equipment. These people are using lenses that cost between $10,000 and $20,000, and they're about this long. And to get close enough on a subject, those people are sitting out there for sometimes years just to get one image of this Arctic fox or whatever they're trying to shoot.
Like National Geographic.
What they're using, and they're usually about 600 millimeter lenses. Now, in comparison, your iPhone has about a 24 millimeter lens. So we're talking a serious zoom here. It's not technically a zoom, but usually prime lenses. But talking about a very long lens versus the shortest lens you can pretty much get, the widest lens you can pretty much get. And Bigfoot isn't typically walking right up in your face. So without a very long lens, if he's at 50 yards, all kinds of factors with the cell phone. Your cell phone's probably going to be auto-focusing on foliage in the foreground, which is going to make the subject in the background blurry.
And
And then
your hand's
also,
shaking because you're nervous, right?
and the more you zoom in, if you use your digital zoom, like that, it
Yeah.
only increases the shake. And it doesn't matter if it's a digital zoom or analog manual lens. That's why you see all those wildlife photographers with these big tripods. These massive lenses are mounted on these big tripods because you need a stable image. And the more you have a
Yeah.
zoom, the more shaky it's going to be. The other thing, even if you're shooting in 4K on an iPhone with a 24 millimeter lens, if the subject is at any distance, all 4K gives you is the ability to crop in that resolution 4 times before you're at 1080p. And then you're going to, the more you crop, the more pixels you're going to get, the more and more you're degrading that footage. So at 50 yards or even 20, 25 yards, you're not going to have the quality of image that people really want. They want these National Geographic images,
Right.
and it's just not feasible with the equipment most people have on them at the time when they have. I mean, most people aren't expecting to have these encounters. It's just someone
Right.
that they're
That's
lucky
why
to
they
get
get
their cell phone.
nervous, and that's why their
Yeah,
hands are shaky, and they're stumbling and fumbling trying to get their phone out.
right.
I feel you. I know, and and people oftentimes when they're trying to explain why Bigfoot's blurry, Joe Monk in the chat has an interesting statement. He said maybe Bigfoot's just blurry. Okay, now
Yeah,
I know that's kind of a funny statement. The normal person would laugh at that. However,
no,
as a field
yeah,
researcher, and you're a field researcher, I'm a field researcher. We understand that perhaps there is something to that. That's more on a energetic level, perhaps.
oh yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of interesting aspects to that. Even if it's just going back to the camera concept, if you have this thing that is covered in hair and it's moving fairly quickly and that hair is swaying, if your shutter speed is not really high, if your FPS, if your frames per second aren't really high, that's going to create a blur anyway. So that's going to
Okay.
create a blur effect. But I think there's a lot of more to it. I've thought about in terms of cloaking and all this other stuff. Is there something we know that Bigfoot hairs are completely different
Mm-hmm.
morphologically than other hairs. So is there are they able to create some sort of blur or camouflage? Think about when
Yes.
your arms you get scared or you get freaked out or the hair on your arm stands up. What is that? That's electrical signals from your brain going all the way through your nervous system and setting off those hairs to stand up. Could they have some similar process where they can send the electrical signals to the hair on their body and you know it's like optical camouflage. People are using fiber optics for optical camouflage today.
Ooh, I like
Um,
that. Optical camouflage.
right.
Yeah.
So um, who knows? There's a lot of things. I mean, we were talking about mind speak before the show. I mean, maybe they're just like zapping us. If they're using mind speak, if they're using telepathy in some way, maybe they're just zapping us with
I think
something.
it, yeah. I 100% think that for sure. And speaking of the optical camouflage, there is also the chance, perhaps, that us as humans don't have the rods and the cones in our eyes to be able to see them at some point.
Oh,
Maybe they
sure,
change their frequency. Maybe they just
absolutely.
go outside of our line of sight in some way.
Yeah, I think we see like 0.0003% of the spectrum or light spectrum or something. It's a really small number. So what we see, if everything we know about our existence comes through our eyes, we're missing a lot because we
Yeah,
see very little of the visible light spectrum.
that's
Um,
right.
yeah, there's a
Yeah.
lot of mysteries out there, so we need to keep our minds open.
Well, thank you. That is my number one go-to statement. Is just to have an open mind about all of this because none of us really know for sure what's going on, and so we're all just trying to do our research and put our thoughts together and to try to unravel some of these mysteries.
Oh, I
And
think the question is a lot more interesting than the answer in most cases. You know,
right.
you know, I think a question's always more interesting, and digging into the question. It's sort of it's the journey, not the destination. Sort of idea. It's the question, not the answer. That's most important.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, Derek in the chat saying use an old Polaroid camera. It gets Bigfoot every time. I don't know. I don't know about that, Derek, but maybe. I don't know. I do miss my Polaroid cameras. So,
You know,
uh,
I have to say for Derek, I think there might be something too. I have a quite the extensive camera collection. A lot of it is antique cameras and old analog cameras, and I think that there may be something. You know, Patty was filmed on a very old camera on, I believe, 16 millimeter,
uh-huh.
um, maybe 8 millimeter. So maybe there is something to, you know, electronic interference or those cameras not picking up. A lot of them still use IR in one way or another. Um, so it could be that they can't see or detect those electrical signals coming off those cameras, whereas these old analog wind up film cameras. So, I mean, who knows? There could be something to it. But, you know, uh, I'm definitely experimenting with older technology to see, you know, what the difference is and how it's used. The problems are really lighting when you're doing night field work. You know, lighting is always a big issue. And I see a lot of people uh, using night vision and IR and that kind of stuff. But and that's something I'm working with too. But I do feel like that's probably likely to be seen by the subjects that we're looking for. So I'm
Yeah.
looking at some more sort of low tech ways of trying to capture an image. Basically, baiting subjects in and then hitting them with a spotlight, some old school long lenses and that kind of thing, trying to basically catch them off guard.
Catch
Um,
the Bigfoot off guard.
if possible, you know, if possible, trying to not use things that people are using today, trying to experiment with using older technology or just not, you know, not trying to run trail cams, not trying to run IR on everything, but more creating a scenario that is classically reported as bringing in um, the subjects for, you know, interesting them to bring them closer to the camp.
Hmm.
And then almost doing like a light trap, I guess you could call it, uh, where we just hit them with a lot of light at the
Huh.
same time from a high vantage point.
Interesting.
Whereas they, you know, a lot of hunters have sightings, and the theory is that because they're up high, the Bigfoot's not getting their scent, right?
When they're up in a
So,
tree stand.
right. So,
Yeah.
um, we're trying to put some people on the ground to draw them in, and then have people in tree stands, not with guns, but with uh, cameras and spotlights to try to basically get a good shot for once.
Yeah.
Get
Yeah.
a
Well,
good shot.
in my experience, a lot of times we feel like perhaps the IR lights scare the Bigfoots away. Like they don't come
Yeah,
around when they see those lights. So
yeah,
we try to go without the IR lights if we can help it.
yeah. There's a lot. The Bigfoot community really it's expensive, and I think that's the problem.
It
Maybe we just need
is.
to start doing some crowdfunding or something more for the actual
Right.
investigation instead of just, you know, puff piece documentaries. But
Yeah.
to get people actually equipped with what they need, which is I think more than anything long lenses. All these shows you see people going out with GoPros, and GoPros have the same focal length as a cell phone camera. It's about 24 millimeters, and it's just not going to. You might get something that's questionable. You might get something that's good for a TV show that gets people excited. What was that? I can't tell. You know, but it's not going to get the definitive evidence that everybody wants. And everybody's so mad about not having. I think is a really nice, crisp, clear shot. And honestly, I think that even if you had all the equipment and you're sitting out in the woods for your entire life, it could still be, you know, it's the lottery. Um,
Right. It is. It's a luck thing. It's like you
right,
if you're meant to see it, you will. If not, you're not. You know.
right. So I mean, again, I think it's more about, I think there's a lot of interesting aspects about Bigfoot that don't require field work. I think there's a lot of interesting things. I think it's Blurry Creatures talks about this, and I may have had the same thought a while back when I started Watch Me Now, was that Bigfoot is really sort of a gateway drug to all things paranormal
Paranormal.
or
You're right.
conspiracy,
100%.
esoteric. It's and that's
I
really why I
love
wanted
that.
to start that page, was that this is sort of ground level conspiracy, paranormal, esoteric subject matter that actually has a pretty significant scientific precedent when we talk about, at least if you want, I mean, and I think we need to start, we're trying to talk to people about this with where we want to go with it, but try to start from an accepted science perspective, whether you accept the science or not. Because we have a time in human history, at least according to evolution, that we're discovering about 2 million to 10,000 years ago ish. This planet was covered in hominid, humanoid, primate, like a little bit of everything. A lot of very human like creatures existed, and we only have a very minute fossil record. So if we have a very minute fossil record and we're already saying, okay, there was a lot of different types of people in the framework of human evolution. Now we now think human evolution was a bush as opposed to a branch or a tree or that kind of thing. It was like all this stuff happening at once. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot to that. There's a lot of historical precedent of creatures that were similar to this, and what would they be now? How would they have? Because you're not dealing. I use the term relict hominids a lot, but I think that's really a misnomer, because they would have continued to evolve and adapt, and they would be something much different now than they were, say, 2 million years ago, or 10,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago. They would have had to continue to adapt and evolve. So we're looking at whatever it is. It might be a hominid. It might be similar to what it was, but I think we're really looking at something that has evolved parallel to us, and is in a lot of ways. I use the sort of saying quite a bit, like, what would we have become had we not crutched on civilization? Because we've really crutched on civilization and the technology and everything that's become, and I think we're kind of devolving into needing that, where maybe we wouldn't be as populated now, but if we hadn't crutched on technology and a lot of, I don't want to say
Right.
medicine, all this stuff, maybe it's the struggle that spawns evolution. So we
That's
may,
right.
if these creatures have persisted to now, they may be more evolved than us in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Um, we were talking about mind speak, and I think there's a lot of potential biological precedent for mind speak or telepathy. Um, and even in 2019, the CIA released a whole bunch of documents talking about successful experiments with telepathy. So if humans can do it, and you had another very human-like creature that was evolving parallel to us, that was, say, a pack hunter,
Mm-hmm.
it might have been an interesting. I mean, that's certainly like possible that maybe instead of crutching on verbal language and everything that comes with civilization, they would have developed that further than we did.
Well, you got to
So,
think what is the generic form basically, or what was replaced with telepathy, what humans
mhm.
used from way back in the day, and animals use today. We all use it. The cell phone, like now, instead of
Oh yeah,
like thinking of someone and doing that mind speak to each other, we have a cell. We just pick up our phone and call each other, right?
right,
So it's been replaced by something that's artificial intelligence, basically.
right. And I
Yeah.
think something interesting in that line of research I found was that, a lot of Bigfoot encounters describe big dark eyes. Like, there's no sclera, there's no white to the
Mhm.
eyes. And why we developed the white in our eyes from an evolutionary perspective was to aid in our verbal communication. As we look at each other and our eyes dart about, the whites accentuate the rest of the eye so that we can sort of read the language going on in the eyes of the other human that we're talking to. Now,
Yes.
with Bigfoot, if he has just big dark eyes and there's very little to no whites, that might indicate that they have developed a language or a way of communicating that doesn't require verbal language, that would need those whites in order to aid in that communication. So yeah, I think there's a lot of different aspects. And then we have, we were talking before the show, the legend of Sulkaloo and the giants from the west that the Cherokee had right around where I am right now. And
you're in North Carolina, by the way, on the border of South Carolina, North Carolina area.
Yeah, I'm actually
over
on the
here on
South
the East
Carolina
Coast
side. Right.
by me. Yes.
And so right up about 30 minutes away is Judaculla Rock, and Judaculla is the anglicized version of Sulkaloo.
One of my favorite spots ever. I love that area. Yes, Judaculla Rock. One of my favorites.
And in the legend of Sulkaloo, they talk about now wherever he was, he knew their thoughts, is what it says. He knew their thoughts. So
he had telepathy. And
that's the story.
Stuff. Yeah.
And he, in some versions, like he would just have game that just sort of wandered around his cave or hit the entrance to his like townhouse. They called it. It's like this big stone townhouse. The Cherokee had a townhouse, which is like their big building in their village, and and the thought was that he was controlling those animals. He was just kind of keeping them outside for easy picking. You just go outside and grab one up. But they were known as the lords of the game, or the masters of the hunt. This race of giants that were Sulkaloo's people, and they were revered, and they did. The Cherokee would invoke them in their dances and rituals before their hunts because they were such revered hunters. But yeah, I named the documentary series I'm working on Masters of the Hunt because it's an homage to those people. It's not about hunting Bigfoot or trying to kill Bigfoot or anything like that. It's an homage to sort of the local giants of my area.
Now, are you referring to actual giants, like human giants, or Sasquatch giants?
That's the debate in regards to what Sulkaloo and his people were. Is that were they? And in my opinion, I think we're talking about all the same thing. Like I was saying before, there was a time where the fossil evidence shows that there were lots of different human-like creatures. And if we look back at folklore anywhere in the world, whether it's trolls or giants or whatever it might be, we're kind of all talking about the same thing in my opinion. And even when I talk about the Bigfoot phenomenon anywhere, wherever it may be, on social media or beyond, I'm really including Orang Pendek and the little people and all those, anything that is, I think our family, our brothers that are out there somewhere, or were out there at one point, brothers to humanity, that may or may not exist today. I think it's a huge scope that we're dealing with. And what they would be today, down where you are, there's the Duhar, which were the Irish giants. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they herded deer as well, like sheep, but they were red-haired giants, supposedly.
Okay, that's interesting. I've not actually heard of that name before, but I know that down at the Okefenokee Swamp, we had the attack. The attack of the giants, or a giant, the giant attack at the Okefenokee Swamp of 1829 in Georgia, and this giant killed 5 men that were hunters that went out kind of looking for it.
That's a crazy
story. But that was a
giant.
Yeah. Well, some people said it was a Bigfoot, but see, I've been trained in remote viewing, and I do that for fun, and it's something that our military uses and all that kind of stuff. Very scientific.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And so when I remote viewed that attack, I saw a giant human, and I have a friend who lives down at the Okefenokee Swamp named Barb, who was telling me on a podcast that we were on together one night that she said that there's a well-known race of giants that lived in the swamp there.
Oh, wow.
And so it backed up my data.
I mean, I think it's all the same. I mean, how do we define? I mean, Bigfoot comes from a big footprint, right? So,
Right. That's true.
how do we differentiate between a giant? Is it just a giant has less hair? As
Right.
in,
Or like a
what is
wild man.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think we're really talking about a lot of different genetic lineages that existed at one point, and likely, based on what we see, still exist. And if you're, we know that Neanderthals and humans, based on DNA, and Denisovans, all were interbreeding at one point. Who's to say that these other variations on human that existed weren't interbreeding
Right.
and haven't continued to interbreed and create very different things than what it once existed, but are that's why we have a variety of witness sightings. We have things that are more ape-like, we have things that are more Neanderthal looking, things that look like a big Native American. Um, so I think, first of all, I think we're dealing with subjects that came from both sides of the United States. A lot of people talk about the Bering land bridge, but I think they came both from both directions, from Europe and Asia during
Yes.
the Ice Age, down both sides. And so on the East Coast, if you look at, you get a lot more Neanderthal looking reports, which is very interesting because they would have likely had an easier migration uh, across the ice from Europe in that direction than going all the way across Asia and across the
Mm-hmm.
land bridge. Whereas on the other side, on the Pacific coast, you see something that's much more patty-like. And even Patty has a very human face once you see the hair removal stuff that they've done.
I've seen
Um,
that.
but much more Asian looking, I would say, or Inuit. I don't know really. Probably can't go back far enough to know what that would be, but what that lineage would be. But yeah, lots of different sightings around the country, and if they were coming in from both ways, you'd be dealing with different creatures, and then or humans or whatever we want to call them, and then they get here and they start breeding. They're likely breeding,
With
and they're
humans, right?
with
Or
you. Well, there's a
potentially.
lot.
Well, we know
Well, that's
Sukalu did, right? He had a
Sukla
human
did.
girlfriend.
He
I don't know
bred
if they had
supposedly
offspring,
two
but
children,
oh, he did.
supposedly with
Okay,
Sukla. I do wonder if he used the mind speak a little bit to pick her up. I'm not sure.
probably.
Um,
Well, he was a
but
he was a savage hunter. Like he
right,
went and killed her some deer and her
that
mama.
was
So
yeah, that was the
yeah,
whole story. Her mama said you got to have a good hunter. And this guy came and said I'm a great hunter, and so he started dropping deer off at their doorstep.
and he kept his girl warm at night with his hairy
Yeah,
self.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So yeah, but yeah, there's lots of stories of interbreeding, and I think we would see a lot of different genetic lineages as well as environmental adaptations. I mean, does a swamp ape need the same foot as a Sasquatch in British Columbia? Does it need the same
That's
foot
right.
morphology? So I think we're dealing with um, a lot of different things that would have adapted and evolved quite differently over all these many thousands of years.
Yeah, well, you mentioned earlier about the wild men, okay, and all the
Yeah.
wild men reports back in the 1800s, especially in early 1900s. The United States, especially around here in the South, we had a lot of newspaper articles about not only giants but wild men. Okay, we have down in Florida the Ocheesee Pond wild man. Okay, there's the
Oh,
Kentucky wild man. There's the
hmm,
Tennessee wild man. There's wild men all
right,
over the place. And
right.
that's back when the newspapers kind of told the truth. Okay,
Yeah,
and
probably a
they
lot more than they do now. Yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, those could be like a hybrid of like a Sasquatch human or something. I mean,
Absolutely.
who's
I'm
to
sure there's
say?
hybridization. I mean, there's too much folklore in all. You can see medieval tapestries and medieval artwork of
Yes,
Bigfoot, the Woodwose in Europe carrying off maidens, and knights coming to rescue them. That doesn't come from nowhere. I mean, there's obviously something
right.
to that. Even I don't want to veer too far off, but even when we're talking about legends and lore, I mean, if you look at Archaeopteryx, which was the first dinosaur fossil we found that had feathers on it, it looks a lot like a dino. It looks a lot like a dragon. It looks like a lot like a little dragon. So I think there's a lot of stuff that's existed a lot of it probably doesn't exist anymore, but I think there was a lot that has existed and persisted for a lot longer than we realize. Um, but there's even stories from the old west of dragons snatching people up and that kind of stuff. So, and of course, the Thunderbird. So, I think we need to keep, like I said before, we need to keep an open mind about what has existed and what may still exist, because it's a big wild world out there.
It is. It's really odd. But I tell me a little bit about your film, the documentary that you've been working on, The Masters of
Sure.
the Hunt.
Right. So, sort of trying to, this is, I was saying earlier when we were, before the show started, documentaries really used to be something that took many years to film. It wasn't like we have this script, we know what we want people to tell us. We're going to go find the people to tell us what we want us, what we want them to say, and we're going to sort of, script this whole thing and put it out for, just monetary gain or whatever the purpose
Mm-hmm.
is. I've been stretching this out now. I started around the time I started the page, late 2019, and then COVID hit, which really put a damper
Dun dun
on
dun. The
the
dreaded,
project.
the dreaded lockdowns, right?
Yeah, lockdowns, and then I had a lot of older witnesses that didn't want to be interviewed, didn't want to be close to anyone for quite a while. And so I started changing gears to sort of focus on this more historical and biological and stuff that we were just talking about. But I've had a really hard time getting the people I want to talk about these issues to talk about it in the terms, in the context of this subject. Trying to get
Yeah.
more people that are more respected and have some really great theories about evolution and that sort of stuff, but they just don't want to touch the Bigfoot subject, which I'm like, the more I tell them about it, they're like, about my thoughts on how all this sort of came about. So our focus has really been some of the things that I get on social media. My social media page has been a great way to sort of do market research and what we need to discuss and that's kind of guided this process. So we're really delving into things, not just witness sightings, which we're doing, not just field, expeditions, which we're doing, that everybody does, not just some beautiful drone footage, which everybody has. We've got all these things, but we're also looking to sort of the stuff we were talking about before in terms of pixelization and focus, and what are all the photographic aspects or video aspects that come involved in this, and the different videos that have come out. The Freeman footage from the 90s was shot on a very different camera than anything we have now, and people might say, oh, that's really pixelated. Well, okay, it was shot on like a shoulder rig VHS camera, right? And then it's been living online and getting compressed even more for 30 years. So I'm using my Bigfoot decoys that I call them. I'm using my Bigfoot suits for both reenactments, B-roll, and also the purpose of setting up different cameras and showing people what you get at the same variable of distance, subject, this kind of stuff. But we're filming on old cameras, for like really old cameras, like paddy cameras and 90s cameras and
That's
cell
awesome.
phone cameras and professional long cameras with long lenses, and what we should be shooting on GoPros, cell phones, everything to show like, okay, this subject's this height in this suit, he's at 50 yards, here's all these different cameras that have filmed the same subject, and let's compare them. And then when it comes to the suits, what does it take to put this suit together and to actually do some of the things that we see in some of these videos? One of my favorite videos is the leaping Almasty or Yeti from Russia. And a lot of people, oh, it's from Russia, it's a hoax, whatever. I think it's a horrible thing to say, but but the creature itself, at the distance it's at, the size it looks, and then what it's doing is incredible. Do you know the video I'm talking about?
Yeah,
He's
I
like
know
leaping over
exactly.
like
It looks it's
fallen
it's
trees.
jumping almost like I've seen videos of Dogman and that I
Yeah.
believe to be real, and Dogman jumps like that as well.
It's
And so
amazing. I mean, it's
it is.
crazy, the athleticism, man. So then I get it CGI. Well, I've had several people in the industry, sit down with me, whether it's like this or actually in person, and show them that video. Let's talk about how we would do this, how we would try to recreate it. We've actually tried to do it practically, because every conversation I've had, and a lot of these people have a lot of experience with CG. It's not CGI. We can tell you that. It's not CGI. There's too many elements that would go into trying to create that. And I often use the example, look at the Hulk in the Marvel movies. The Hulk's cool. It's great and all. He's one of my favorite comic book characters, but they still have not been able to create a visual that, in my opinion, is realistic. It still looks like CGI, if you know what I mean. It's
Yeah,
cool CGI, but it's still, you're still
totally.
like, well, that's obviously CGI. There's a director called Neil Blomkamp that does some really great mixes of CGI and practical effects that really make a much more realistic effect. But even then, the amount of work that would go in for this little Russian kid and his father to have hoaxed that video, it's just simply impossible. But we've tried to create some suits that we fabricated some elements, I'll just say, to the suits to give the person more athleticism to try to do what that creature was doing, and it's not feasible. Even in basic test, we've had some injuries. We've had some problems. It's really hard to create some of these videos that are out there.
I mean, you'd have to have a serious athlete to be able to do things
Right.
like that, in addition to wearing a big, hot, heavy suit, right?
And even so, they're not jumping over trees like that guy was doing. I mean, they're not jumping over these giant
Right.
fallen trees and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. So that's an aspect of the docu series. It's how can we try to replicate these, and if they can't be replicated with thousands of dollars put into it, and lifelong film professionals trying to pull this off, what is the average person just out here trying to hoax something going to be able to do
Yeah.
just for views? And we're looking at the best videos for these kinds of things. Um, so there's that. There's the cinematic aspects of, like we talked about, the cameras and running
Yeah.
experiments with cameras to see, those kinds of things. Running experiments in the field. It's all about experimentation, trying to really come up with sort of a blueprint for how to do this, because I don't think there is one
There's not one.
specific.
So this is you're blazing the trail, Trey, right?
Let's create a blueprint, and let's say this
Yes.
is the gear you need. And a great thing now is that, while a lot of people can't afford a $20,000 600 millimeter lens, there's a lot of
No.
great companies that rent them now, that rent them at a much more affordable rate. So you could go out in the field if you do feel like you have a good area where there is activity and you're likely to get something on camera. Then go out with the right equipment, rent it for a week or 2 weeks or a month or whatever, and
I'd
go
be
out and,
scared to rent some expensive equipment like that.
well, it's all
Considering,
insured. It's
well, you got to consider also, like, every time when my team's out there, we have equipment malfunctions every
Yeah.
single time we're out there. So I would be worried that something might break, you know?
Yeah, I mean that's why you have the insurance. They require you to get insurance with it as part of your overall fee. But that is a reason why I've been wanting to test more and more of these sort of old cameras I have, that don't have as many moving parts or
Yeah.
chips or
Long
anything like
lenses
that.
and stuff. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
um, so yeah, it's
Digitals, like the digital aspect to it. I
right,
think it's amazing. I mean, you're using like every era's camera, like from the 1960s to whenever, back when, even when Patty was
right,
filmed, and you're
yeah.
you're trying out different angles of I mean, you're doing serious research on this actually, and
I
I
think
don't
it's
know
a
a whole
whole
lot of
other
people
thing.
doing it.
It's a
Yeah.
different. It's you know, Quentin Tarantino has been quoted as saying, "Go out, and make the movie you want to see." So that's kind of what I'm trying to do here in terms of I want to answer the questions that I have and the questions I see people asking on social media, and try to. We're not get the chances of I could go out and hoax. I have suits. I could go out and try to, like, we're out in the woods with our flashlights, and oh, is that something over there? Oh,
Did you
have some
hear
guy run
that?
through.
Right?
I could do all that all day, and I could probably make a lot of money on Amazon or whatever.
TikTok.
T-
TikTok
well,
videos too, right?
oh man, TikTok. My TikTok already has like 380,000 followers, so I could totally be taking advantage of all these people. But I'm trying. I've tried from the beginning to create as much integrity around the subject as possible and try to continue to do that. And so that's why it takes longer. I don't want to just go out and just film interviews and mix it up with some B-roll. And I don't want to dramatize anything. And so where do you go with that, with the Bigfoot cryptid subject matter? Let's look
Yeah.
into how can we do this right? And I think it's become a very interesting thing for me. And that's why this whole thing has sort of evolved as it should, in my opinion, over time. Um, this is our process. It's the process of trying to really research how this should be done while we're doing it. Um, so yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
that's
I
what the
mean,
doc's
you
about.
absolutely. And now, okay, so you have all these, you have these suits that you guys have made. It looks very much like a Bigfoot. You actually have an Instagram page for the guy in the suit. Is called the Biggin Official Biggin, right?
The big and official, yeah.
The
So
Biggin
that's
Official.
right. So that's a variation on one of the suits. I do, as you said in the opening bio, I do work in marketing. I do work in social media. That's sort of my bread and butter. And so I had a client that really wanted to do this as part of a marketing campaign. And so we sort of created a version of one of the suits we were already working on for that campaign. And we take the big and out uh, in different cities and let him just meet people. And it's been a great thing too for, people are like, oh, if I would see a Bigfoot if it was on the side of the road or whatever, or the dog didn't react or this or that. I had that Bigfoot standing on the side of the road on a very busy road, and there are people driving by nonstop. And I'll tell you what, most people never saw this guy who, within the full suit, is probably over 7 feet tall, really wide,
Whoa.
350 pounds plus. They were looking at their phones, or they were looking straight
Right.
ahead, or they were, we were watching, we were dumbfounded because he's waving. Huge guy out in the open. He's not hiding behind anything. He's out in the open. So we're just trying to get reactions. It was a day we were testing some modifications to the suit, and we were like, let's walk outside and see what happens. Nobody, I'd say 1 out of every 10 cars might have noticed it, maybe. So let's say,
What?
so
That's
maybe yeah,
wild.
it was wild. It was such a great little experiment that was just kind of off the cuff. Um, but even so, I've taken it. I have some videos where there's dogs in the videos with the Bigfoot sighting. People say, "Oh, the dog didn't react." I've had dogs not react to this guy at all. I've had some dogs go crazy, but I don't think you
Yeah.
can judge every situation or every individual, whether it's a dog or a human, how they're going to react in the same. Just say every person's going to react this way, or every dog's going to react this way. And going back to the driving, to, the busy street, we drive down the wooded highways all the time.
Yeah.
Imagine if one of these things is peeking out from behind a tree. Do you really think you're going to notice it? I can tell you from my little experiment, most people are not paying any attention. They would never see it. And even if you're flying by at 70 miles an hour, even if you're looking out of the woods, what are the chances? You're going to see it in the shadows of the wood line. So, a
Slim.
lot
Very
slim.
slim. Yeah.
So, we've got lots of fun experiments we've been able to do with these suits in terms of addressing a lot of the arguments of the naysayers on social media and beyond. Um, it's just fun. We're having a good time. And like I said, we're looking into history. We're going to different areas. So we're starting in the Southeast. Obviously, my home state, South Carolina. I've lived all over, but I'm back here now. South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee is sort of our first four big areas that we're hitting. Um,
Those are
and we're
good
doing
states. Those are good.
right.
But they're full of Bigfoots. I can tell you from
They
experience.
are, and I
They
really
are.
think it's much more active. I think the spread of reports across this country have a lot more to do with culture, the culture of the areas, impacting reporting than it does
Yeah.
actual population density, you know? So,
Interesting connection there. I like that. I
yeah, I mean,
agree.
I think people here, I mean, guy that lives on this farm who's actually on a part of his interviews on Instagram where he had a sighting in Tennessee, but he's got activity here as well. He says, you know, I'll try to talk to some people. I'll be at a party or something. I'll bring it up, and people come over and hush me. Don't talk about that. They're like his friends, like, or his, you know,
You're gonna look
relatives or whatever.
crazy,
Right.
right?
So it's the culture in a big way. Now you know, I've lived on the West Coast. You go out to the West Coast, and people are like all about it. You know, they want to talk about this stuff. They have no problem. They're talking about way crazier stuff than Bigfoot. So it's not a big deal as much. But you know, here on the East Coast, especially in the South and the Bible Belt, it's not really something that, you know, I have people that know me and they know of the social media, whether they follow it or not, and they'll every once in a while, you really believe that? And you know, they'll just off the cuff ask me that. And I'm like, you know, I don't believe in Bigfoot. And when I say that, people get, you know, you don't believe in Bigfoot. I don't believe in Bigfoot at all. I'm not telling anybody I believe in Bigfoot. I infer that they're based on all the evidence that I've looked at and all the research I've done over many years. There's a great possibility that we're dealing with a very real phenomenon. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe in it. I think believing requires a significant lack of evidence. And I think we have a lot more evidence than requiring a necessity for belief. Now, if you've seen one, you can be a believer because you've seen it, you've had the encounter, you've experienced it. Um, but I think for me, it's an inference. I'm making a calculated inference that thousands of years of folklore and historical reports, you know, scientific precedent in our fossil record, um, tons of modern witness statements, you know, where there's smoke, there's fire, you know, so there's got to be something to it.
Absolutely. There's something to it. I've been boots on the ground researching for quite a while, and I can tell you they're real. They're definitely real. Kira, thank you for that super sticker. You are the sweetest. I just appreciate you so much. And also CS, thank you for that super sticker as well. You guys are the best. Yeah, Trey, I absolutely agree with you 100%. I think that the research that you're doing is very cutting edge, and I appreciate what you're doing and having an open mind about all of this, and putting it out there for the general public to get a taste of what we experience in the field, you know, and even where you live on that gigantic farm that you live on. I bet you're going to have some Bigfoot experiences out there. I know you just moved there not too long ago,
Yeah,
but you're in a hot spot over there.
yeah, it's pretty busy. We're about a couple miles from Tigerville. I have a great video. I think it's a great video on Squatch Meow. It's one of the very first videos I posted. What looks like a very red-haired Bigfoot conical head. It's carrying. I don't know how well you can see it on a phone, but um, like I said, I don't know if it was before the show or since we've been on
Yeah.
air. But I look at these videos on a huge monitor, huge editing monitor, and I look at them frame by frame, and it's carrying a deer on a buck across its back,
Whoa.
walking through a wood line. The deer either has some sort of wound on its neck, so I don't know if it's a bite or where perhaps a compound fracture where the neck was broken. But you know, I live with hunters out here in this area all the time, and we're talking about it. It's like, okay, that's an 8-point buck. We're looking at the footage. You know, a couple 100 pounds at least. This guy's just got it thrown over his back, walking through uneven ground in a wood line in a Bigfoot suit.
Probably not. Probably not a human, I would
And then there's
think.
all kinds of behavioral stuff. If you look at it frame by frame, you hear a lot about these things acting like they're almost like meth heads or something, like they're like cracked out, like they're you know, really
I've seen videos of
fidgety.
that. Yes. Right.
Right, and this thing is definitely like darting its head back and forth,
Yeah.
looking at the person filming it
Well, you have to
very
take that into
quickly.
consideration that it could be a feral human or someone that is on
Sure.
drugs, right? So,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Carrying a 200-pound deer
Or
in his
drinking
back,
moonshine. I don't know.
maybe. Really, it's a
Right.
really hairy. It's a really hairy one, and he's got a deformed head. So, but that's not far from here. And then there's a. If you guys follow the Bigfoot mapping project, there's a sighting
Yes.
that was about quarter mile from where I'm sitting right now, and that just popped up fairly recently on that app. But 2 years ago, I was interviewing someone that had an encounter right over there. So it's an active area. I think people don't want to talk about it as much. So it's really getting people opened up. But I think it is. The one good thing about all these shows, whether they're good or not, or whether they're dramatized or not, it's getting it more into the consciousness, it's getting into the
Absolutely.
collective and getting people more interested in talking about it, more open to talking about it.
Absolutely. I have one last question. We've got about a minute left tonight. What do
Oh,
you think
wow.
about red circles on pictures?
Oh, yeah. I don't post them.
Me
I,
neither. Okay.
I,
We can
yeah,
agree.
I can't validate the people, and I don't call anybody a liar, but I can't take them as any evidence that I'm going to put out there.
Wow. I know. I feel you. I appreciate that. And I love your Instagram, all your social media. Everybody, please go to his link tree. Actually, go to, let's see what we got here. Let me pull it up. Squatch _ me _ now. Squatch. And yes, we said Squatch on Spaced Out Radio tonight. I got to tell you, Trey, Squatch was actually a word that we weren't supposed to be using on Spaced Out Radio until I had a talk with Dave Scott this past week, a couple
Wow.
weeks ago, actually. And I was like, I've got too many of my friends out here that have Squatch in their name. We need to start bringing them on Spaced Out Radio. So I got permission, and now we're
Nice.
gonna have we've got Trey from Squatch Me Now on tonight. Trey, thank you so much for being here. This has
Hey, I love
been
it.
amazing. Literally, it's been
It's always
amazing
fun.
tonight.
Goes by too fast.
It went by so fast. It did. It
Yeah.
is. So please come back and hang out with me again, and let's talk some more Bigfoot in the future, if you don't
Let's
mind.
do it.
Okay, let's do it. Everybody, please go subscribe. You guys go to Squatch Me Now. Do you have YouTube as well? You're on YouTube, or are you just on other? Okay.
I'm on
All
YouTube,
right, go
TikTok,
subscribe, y'all.
Facebook, Instagram.
You are a no nonsense kind of like Bigfoot evidence, fact based kind of stuff. Like it just opening people's minds, and I appreciate you, Trey. So we will see you
Thanks,
next
Jessica.
time here. Yeah,
Have a good
absolutely.
one.
Thank you. Awesome.
Thanks.
Have a good night. Okay.
You too.
Let me
Bye-bye.
see ya. Okay. Bye. All right. Everybody, please go follow Trey over there on Squatch Me Now. Let me take this down. Please go over to After Hours now and go hang out with Marquise and Danielle. They've got a fantastic show lined up for you guys tonight. Next time on Spaced Out Radio's Off the Trails, I have Mike from Long Island Bigfoot, who's going to join me here at Spaced Out Radio. I hope you guys will come see me at the Cryptid Huntress on YouTube this week, Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern and Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern. I'm going to have live shows this week. They're going to blow your mind, as usual. So everybody, y'all have a wonderful week. I am so glad y'all spent your Saturday and Sunday nights with the Cryptid Huntress. I will see you guys this week. Y'all have a good night. Bye.